This is Cyber Smokehouse, and I'm Ernie.
And I'm Graeme.
Join us as we grill the minds, dig into the experience, and serve up the stories of leaders in cybersecurity.
Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm.
We're excited to introduce today's guest. He's a transformational cybersecurity and IT executive with more than 30 years' experience. He's built cybersecurity programs from the ground up, advised AI and cybersecurity startups, and developed modern cybersecurity frameworks. He's built out and consulted on identity access management programs, led digital transformation efforts, has led several organizations through numerous public security incidents. He's held senior security leadership roles at organizations such as Poopless Sapient, Walt Health, and Kota. He has built transformation security programs, led large-scale DevOps and compliance initiatives, helped organizations strengthen their defenses against emerging cyber threats, worked as a chief information security officer in many roles. Michael Myint, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me.
All right, Michael, let's light the fire and crank up the heat in the smokehouse. So every smokehouse runs on different fuel. What's driving the most heat in your world right now? And when not just the buzzwords, but where do you think, as you look out at the industry, where's the real operational pain points?
Yeah, I would say, it's a buzzword, but it's an old word, right? Innovation. And I think so much is happening right now. There's definitely a transformation in our environments, in the ecosystem of technology and risks of threats, especially with the accelerated speed of AI, right? So it surpassed the speed of Moore's law. And now we see different variations, significant changes every 3 months when it comes to the power of AI and its capabilities. When it was first introduced about 4 years ago, now we're looking at, autonomous agentic AI, and we see just in recent activity, just last week with the layoffs in large technology companies, really leaning into AI capabilities and unfortunately reduction in workforce across the technology ecosystem.
Yeah, so I know a lot of buzz in the security industry has been around Mythos and the ability to kind of identify these vulnerabilities that have been around for a long time, but no one's really seen them before. And so do you see that as like what's your perspective on that? And do you see that as a big concern that security leaders should be worried about?
It is a concern. How big, I guess it depends on the environment, the company itself, and how mature the program is, right? I think one of the struggles that we've all had for decades now is really vulnerability management. So the speed to identify things that may have existed for quite some time without it being known. With the emergence of Mythos, it's a risk, right? But what is the exploitability of that threat or that vulnerability, right? So I think always back to foundations. We have the defense in depth. We have a proper segmentation in our environment. If we have the proper prioritization and classification of our assets to know if it's, what would be the impact if compromised, it'll go a long way. But that said, I think companies really need to work on their maturity of the vulnerability management programs.
Yeah. So when do you see those programs breaking down? I mean, in my experience, identification doesn't tend to be a problem, right? I mean, obviously with things like Mythos, you're going to probably get more identification, but it's normally the remediation that's the long pole in the tent, right? It takes, how do you get IT to patch or reconfigure the systems to address the identified vulnerabilities?
I think the good thing or the positive impact of all of this notoriety of the Mythos and what has gone on in the news is board awareness, that, hey, this risk does exist, right? So the business has a little less to lean on when it comes to, hey, we can't make these changes, right? The legacy systems, we can't make these patch updates. Hey, you're going to have to make some transformation there. You're going to have to update your applications or your products to be on more up-to-date platforms. So I think with leadership awareness now, we have a little bit more push or support behind us to make the business listen and say, hey, we can't just keep going on and use the operations as an excuse.
No, I think you're right. And we've certainly seen that with some of our clients as well. I know you've had sort of a part of your career's been in startups. And so I'd be interested in your perspectives on, you've worked in large organizations, you've worked in kind of, startup organizations. How does the security challenges, how are they different? And then how do you approach, when you go into a new organization, how do you approach building out that program?
The big difference is when you're in a small organization or startup environment, so you have to wear a lot more hats. Right? In the large organizations, you're more setting strategy, setting milestones, managing your leaders, right? I think hopefully most people are trying to build future leaders. So we want to give them some responsibility and accountability for their areas of the program. But back to the startup world versus the large institutions, we all have the same problems. I was at a startup that was a Series A, and I had to build from, greenfield. So everything was brand new. I had the fortunate luxury of being able to identify what our company needed in a healthcare space. And we had HIPAA concerns, regulatory things that we have to make sure that we were protected for, and a lot of HIPAA data, right? So being able to identify in a cost-effective way in a small organization that solutions that would be supported by a small team or MSPs, that was one concern I had in a smaller organization. But we were nimble, we were able to bring things in quickly, and I was able to leverage, sometimes it's better when you have external resources that you can leverage to make things happen faster than when you're trying to bring in an FTE to, help support a particular area within the security program, right? In the larger organizations, things are a little bit more slow moving. There's a lot of influence you have to do, a lot of buy-in, even though you may have budget, so to speak. It's not necessarily there because you're fighting for that reallocation as the financials change throughout the year, and you have this quarterly, revenue outputs. Then things kind of have to adapt, right? So a little bit more complicated at larger organizations, but you're sailing the Titanic versus your speedboat.
I'm curious. So Graeme and I have just gone through our first startup. Take just the cyber side out of it. If you look at the totality of the role, which one did you have more fun at? Or which one did you like better? The big organization or the startup?
Well, I love growing people. And I love to have exposure to a lot of things happening. Whatever's impactful. I think in a small organization, high growth is more fun. Definitely a lot of stress there because everything's on your shoulder, right? You have direct accountability. Hey, it was Michael's idea. Everything's happening because of that. In a larger organization, things are a bit more spread out, but then it's a lot slower moving. But when you make an impact, it's, an impact at a much larger scale, right? So back to the days Apple was a sapient large organization, some, certain things took a number of years, but we were able to show, measured progress quarter after quarter, even though it took years to be able to finally say, hey, this is what we've done with, bringing security in our SDLC. This is what we, bring in DevSecOps. This is what we did for cloud security, how we secured our client environments. So, it was a great feeling to have after a long effort and a lot of work and a lot of people's energy going into it. It's very gratifying. But I think in a smaller organization where things are just happening, and if you have that type of personality where you just like to rock and roll and be impactful a lot quicker, I think that that's more satisfying.
So it sounds like both are good. It just depends on different kinds of,
I guess, right? And also your energy level. Sometimes it takes its toll.
And then one other thing I want to touch on. So you had mentioned when we opened, just the layoffs and jobs getting replaced, and I think the AI being a driver. Do you think it's an over rotation? My feeling is that I think it's an over rotation. I think the roles are probably getting eliminated, but we're still going to need the people. What are your thoughts? I mean,
I agree with that mostly. I'm a strong proponent of, hey, let's keep the people, let's retool. There's always other areas that they can focus, right? A big push thing this year or the past 8 months or 8, 9 months has been, the AI SOC, right? However, we can be more effective, increase the speed to identification of risk, our environments, and even the MDRs, and where we have our leaning toward AI and really publicizing their AI capabilities to support that AI SIMs now, right? So I actually brought one on just last year, but you know, it's just retooling, right? AI is going to do so much. I think what's going to hurt, it'll affect the repetitive commodity type, roles that people have. It'll probably affect folks coming out of university, the lower stage in the career. They'll just have to figure out how to best approach it, right? I was asked recently, hey, should somebody get into, computer engineering or computer science or learn cybersecurity? I was just talking to my friend about this on Tuesday. And I'm like, yeah, it's a fun field now for me and maybe, folks 5, 10 years younger than me, but it's going to be a very different landscape over the next 10 years, which is great. I mean, that's why I love technology. I mean, we're going to be in the future and, very shortly as far as the capabilities with AI and technology and computers. And, we're going to have a lot more, quantum computing. Well, we are going to have quantum computing by that time. It's just going to be a very different landscape. So how are the new folks going to be able to adapt to that? How are they going to have the knowledge and awareness of, what's really happening with the, the sprockets on the back end, right? So I think right now, it's enabled a lot of folks to get involved in technology, like with prompt engineering and vibe coding, but they don't know the nuts and bolts in the back end. Troubleshoot. They don't know the big picture of if something is failing on, on one side, what could be, the dependencies, right? So there's definitely challenges there.
yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, it's interesting you bring up quantum computing. I was going to ask you about emerging technologies and what else what else are you monitoring? So, but what are your thoughts on quantum? So we've asked a lot of CISOs on here, and it's interesting. We get very different perspectives. I mean, some say, "Look, Ernie, I'm not worried about that. We can't even patch our systems right now. We're trying to think about that." And then others are very concerned about it. They're like, "Look, this thing's coming. We need to be ready." What side of the spectrum are you on?
The thing is, the malicious actors always have more resources than we do, right? They have, so to speak, unlimited budget. There's the nation state actors. They have a same amount of budget. Their organizations are larger than many of our Fortune 5 organizations. And their, one goal or objective is just to, get into our environment, take over and cause havoc, right? So having that type of ability with quantum for the malicious actors is definitely something to concern about, right? When it comes around, maybe still 4 or 6 years away, who knows, right? And tie that in with AI capabilities, what's going to be happening. I mean, maybe a lot of the malicious actors will start losing their job because they're going to start relying on, AI to do most of the work, and they won't have to worry about paying all of those post adversary countries. So we'll see, but I think it is something to be concerned about. Again, right now, what we have to do is lean back into fundamentals and make sure that we have different team in it and work on really, classifying and prioritizing our assets so we have the best protections and the most protections on those, very critical assets.
And so I'm curious though, we had talked about before we hit the record, you did a couple conferences. What were the other buzz were going on as far as tech's concerned, emerging tech? Did you see any good themes?
I think what's happening right now, something I actually spoke spoke on a couple of weeks ago on a panel is what are the tangible use cases for AI that companies have put out there that have shown actual value to the organizations, right? So I mean, there's two areas how AI has been leveraged for companies. I think it's been predominantly within their staff solutions, and many of the vendors have to use AI power to just provide more value, provide more speed, provide more accuracy, identify content quicker, at least from a street perspective. The companies that are building internally, building their own products and leveraging, large language models, it's a little bit smaller, but, there's more concern there, right? How are we making sure that how the training is happening, how the data is secure, and what applications are being built or what's being delivered to the consumer and how the consumer is interacting. So, we talked about those actual use cases that are present, how it's affected the business, how it's been able to add value or actually generate revenue in some cases, right? You have some things that should have been commoditized a long time ago when you call into a help desk or you call into, purchase, refills and the prescriptions or whatever it may be, right? So that kind of stuff, I think there's better voice systems now, better routing, more intelligence on how to better support a customer out there, whatever support that is. And it could definitely speed up the process for companies to increase revenues at a quicker turn. Right? Just like think about restaurants and how often they have to turn their team, right? So I think use of AI in that capacity for a lot of companies has actually done tangible value.
Dude, there's just so much going on out there. Like, how do you keep up with this? So, I mean, obviously, it sounds like conferences are a big one, and you appreciate the networking. How else do you read a lot? Do you do podcasts? I mean, what's your big source of information?
I don't read a lot because a lot of the reading I do is for the job at hand, doing research to solve a problem and figure out a path or troubleshoot. I mean, I'm still a bit hands-on and get my hands dirty and try to troubleshoot issues that we may be having with a certain system. I'm even in there, figuring around with the configurations of our tool sets. But outside of that, it really is, I think, talking with my peers, talking with actual practitioners. So I do engage a lot in various communities. So I'm probably part of a dozen different security forums / communities. I do go to security events pretty regularly, maybe at least once a week, maybe. Not necessarily a full day thing, but 2 hour workouts or something to that nature to stay on top. And everyone has a different perspective. Everyone has tried something else because everyone's environment is different, right? So at the end of the day, things have to be tailored for a specific environment, tool set. So when you find someone, an environment that has some commonalities to yours, then you could dig in a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'm sure getting vendor demos too. You get problems you didn't even know you needed to solve.
All the time. And I do quite a lot of those. I'm plugged into a lot of startup organizations, as you had mentioned earlier. I provide advisory services to different startups. I see a lot of demos.
I think that's good though, because I think it keeps you aware of what's on the leading edge, right? I mean, it's when I was in a IT role, and people wanted to come and show me stuff, I'd say, "Oh, okay, I'll take a look." It's it's an hour of my time, but I'm not going to do it every day. But I'm going to maybe once or twice a week, I might spend an hour looking at what's new, because it's a great way of keeping up. And so it's great. Hey, let's talk a little bit about your leadership style, Michael. So you've led lots of different teams. How would you describe your leadership style?
I like to build people. I'm very fortunate that in some of my past lives, when I was a mentor, and I have folks that started out just coming out of college, I was able to engage with them on a regular basis and give them lessons learned, some guidance that I didn't receive. I mentioned just a few weeks ago to someone else that, as I've gone through my 30-year plus journey in cybersecurity, I myself had never had a mentor, right? I just learned from mistakes that I felt my managers were doing. Like, okay, I'm not going to punish people that are on my team that way, and I'll do all of that I can to grow them, let them understand certain facets, let them see the big picture, and give them ownership for whatever the overall strategy is for the organization as I'm planning out for the security program, right? So I guess consensus, hey, does this make sense to you? All right, you're gonna like, hey, what's your interest besides that area that you're in now, right? So if you're in GRC and apps or vulnerability management or threat intelligence, okay, let's do some shadowing. Then hey, you pull this part, right? So and that, as we go throughout the year and we do our formal evaluations, they get evaluated on these pieces that are part of the overall program, right? So if they're successful, all that builds up into a pyramid where I can demonstrate successful metrics as well and the valuable outcomes, right? That have come from all of the work that the entire team has done. And that's my approach to it, right? And once we set our minds on what the objectives are, the milestones, I let them go, right? I don't like micromanaging. I don't like to be micromanaged. I believe in trust, right? By verifying. and then where needed, I'll do working sessions, work hands-on with folks, because I've been in all areas of, after the 30 years of entire information security, right? On the GRC side, I've written policies. I've done audits. I've been on the other side of the, audit table, supporting internal audit for clients. Side where the external auditors are asking us questions and looking for evidence, and I'm reaching to different members of different teams for specific snapshots. So, whatever makes sense, wherever the interests are, and then I try to make sure that they have the guidance.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think two things from there is one is you're paying forward doing things for others that maybe people haven't done for you. So that's great. You've seen things that you would have wanted, and you're passing it on to other people and making sure that so that the same things aren't repeated. I mean, and then I think I love I was always when I was leading large teams, I always used to ensure that when I was setting objectives with my direct reports, that it was always something about like networking or going out and talking to getting outside their circle. And I think you mentioned that, getting outside their circle, talking to other people, learning about a different part of the business, learning like you mentioned, learning about a different part of the security function. That's how you could develop. So that's great advice there. What about recruiting people?
The challenge I feel has always been finding the right candidates. I guess there is a large supply, right? I don't believe that there's not enough population out there. There's a lot more people than there are security roles. You see it every day on the job boards. And a lot of the requirements don't necessarily match to the role that they're hiring for, right? But at the same time, I think there's quite a lot of fluff as far as people are trying to break into cybersecurity. They're trying to say they could do this and that. But I feel, maybe a difference of opinion with other security leaders out there, but I think you need some sort of foundational background, understanding networking, understanding identity, understanding, help desk operations, how that works, right? Understanding how to, build websites, right? Before you can move into a cybersecurity role. So I think you need a foundation first, right? So that's why I also believe it's a little bit challenging for people fresh out of school, even though they may be getting a cybersecurity degree, which didn't exist back in my day. Right. Yeah. It's finding those right resources.
Let's switch gears a little bit here. Interested to get your thoughts on communicating, in the organization. So how do you, if you've got any secret sauce in terms of the way that you communicate to, say, the board and the senior leadership team about security risks and what you do, what you're trying to get done?
Yeah, I would say you can't necessarily over communicate, or you can't over try to communicate to many of the other leaders, right? So you're not always going to get their time, but you have to keep trying to reach out, keep trying to schedule those meetings. If you're not able to get, a monthly meeting, try to get at least a quarterly meeting with a given executive. If you're not able to, even get them on the line for 30 minutes, send them emails, right? Or send them a Slack message, follow up. Whether it's, part of the, L1 ELT, or it's members of the board, right? Send them messages, get on a call. Sometimes they're only willing to talk, while they're at the airport waiting for their flight, right? Now they have 20 minutes to spare. Hop on the phone with them. As far as the content, what I'm communicating, it's, hey, what makes sense to them, right? From, business terms, from financial terms, the impact of whatever it is that you're working on, you're trying to sell them on or get their support on. What is the impact on the business objectives? How do, when you provide metrics, what are the metrics tied to, right? Aside from the OA, this is, how many vulnerabilities we had. This is how much we patched. This is the, our phishing results and how poorly or, greatly perform, all that stuff is just for the appendix, right? So identify metrics that are somehow tied to revenue, right? How we as security practitioners have supported certain endeavors and technology or product that's being delivered, and how we helped with the speed, right? Speed to delivery, speed to a new release, accuracy of searching data, right? We're very involved in data as well. So, whatever we can do to, speak their language and provide the same type of content.
Yeah, they wouldn't come here and put it on the show. But, it'd be interesting to mix it up. But no, I appreciate your leadership style, and I think that does resonate with people. And that's probably why you recruit well and have a good team. All right. I do want to switch gears a little bit on you. So if you were to make a bold prediction about where cybersecurity is headed in the next 5 years, what do you think?
I think the AI is going to make an impact, definitely. And tasks that are commoditized, if anything, it's going to hit a lot of the vendors or solution providers, a lot of capabilities that they have right now. Companies are going to be able to bring that in-house for a lot, cheaper. And I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation spaces. I think over the past 2-3 years, there's been a lot of segmentation and popping up of, various types of solutions in this ecosystem, because there were niche capabilities that we were all identifying. Like, hey, we have to do this. Hey, we have to do that. Right? I mean, cyber threat intelligence, C10, CASM, right? Traditional vulnerability management. There became all of these different players. They became, one quadrant split into 5 different quadrants, right? I see a consolidation coming back, and because companies always have to do more with less. The budget's always strained. I think companies and leaders like myself are looking for options where, we don't need the, best of class in these 5 different areas. Let me get a great, solution that covers these 5 different areas, and this part is nice to have. This part will, will do. And we're really going to have to figure out what the risk tolerance is on each of these areas. What is the potential impact of this risk in this space? And how can we leverage an existing vendor cover these other areas, right? Right now, some of these vendors, they don't cover enough areas, or they're trying to. They built their marketing materials, but when you get deep dive technical demos and asking the hard questions, they don't have the right answers, right? So some of the big vendors are in that space right now, but they may catch up. But, because of that, we are trying to see how much more we could get from a lower amount of vendors.
Yeah, and if you think about the MSSP market and those vendors, I mean, that with AI really need to reinvent themselves, or reinvent yourself or disappear is what we're going to be. No kidding. Um, well, well, I feel like a lot of this has been like doom and gloom, I think. And one of the questions we usually ask is what excites you about the future and the field and where we're going. So I don't know, is the AI story an exciting one for you, or is it a doom and gloom? So what are you excited about?
I think we all have to be nimble and always adapt. I love technology. I've been you know, a techie. I've been a sci-fi geek, growing up seeing, watching things like Star Trek and Star Wars and what have you, and what the future can definitely be, how far it is. And I wish I would be alive for some of that. That's, I'm sure is going to happen. Yeah. I think it's exciting, right? But we have to have an open mind. We have to be innovative. We have to be accepting of, a lot of these new players, right? They are bringing, new ideas, new ways of looking at things, helping address some problems that we had, like I mentioned, that we didn't know we had, right? But it is a risk out there, right? Unfortunately, in some cases, we're going to know that this problem exists because we were compromised. Now it's a big deal, right? So we can get, an outside look into certain areas, keep our eyes and ears open for that, right? And, that's why I like going to a lot of, security functions. Just I'll always be learning.
Tell us about your career start. When you were coming up through high school, did you think you're going to have a career in cybersecurity?
Not at all. I mean, that wasn't even a term, right? Cybersecurity didn't exist even when I started my career. I mean, when I was in middle school, that's when the whole PCs first came out, right? And I was, you had your Super NES and Sega Genesis and whatever. So I've always loved technology as a kid. High school, I had no idea what I was going to do. In college, my first couple of years, I had no idea what I was going to do. Until one day, one of my junior marketing classes, one of the professors started talking about his background in consulting and at Big Four consulting. So I thought, oh, that was pretty interesting. I grew up in the city, Chicago, so I really didn't get exposed too much. I didn't travel anywhere. And I was the first in my family to get through college, right? But, getting that exposure to somebody that had seen the world, travel, talk to businesses, kind of something that, I've only seen on TV, and meeting somebody that went through that process, that kind of intrigued me. Oh, how do I become a consultant? What do I know? What would I be able to do, right? But I was fortunate to land my first career job at it doesn't exist anymore. It transferred. It was called Anderson Consulting, right? And now it's known as Accenture, but it changed its name because of the big thing that happened back in the mid-90s, right? And they had a method back in the past where, regardless of what your degree was, background, go to boot camp for a large number of weeks, and then we would teach you COBOL and Visual Basic and whatever else, creating these interfaces. So from there, I was part of the technology delivery team, and I started learning, building websites and working with different types of user repositories, and that was it. I mean, throughout years of being on the consulting side, I would say about at least half of my career, 18 or so years, was on the consultant side across various Big Four, and I even did some independent consulting, which is probably not what they use as term as BC self for a bit too. And until I went into Publicis Group and took on my first role as the security leader over at Publicis Stadiums, and worked the program for 7 years. It was a great experience. And then after that, I wanted to see what the startup world was like, because things started to emerge and there was a lot of activity there. So I started to dip my toe in it and went off into Series A startup in a PDM health tech space. From there, I ended up in Series E PE-backed startup in the health tech space, and then I ended up And my last employer, which was that to, global Fortune 500 healthcare operation.
That's quite and you've had a lot of great experiences. To going from consulting into an enterprise role, how was that transition for you?
I think it helps a lot. And I think, the Big Four consulting background is a great background to have, right? They really do teach you to work hard. They teach you to be organized in your thought and your way that you assess situations and try to come up with solutions, right? Not just identifying problems, right? No one wants anyone on their team or have to work with or partner with people or teams that just identify problems, right? Hey, let's work to identify a solution together and make progress, right? So I think the Big Four and the consulting backgrounds really help in getting in there, dropping down, and understanding the situation. When I was a consultant in my more senior years, I would go into a big client by myself, be a 2-week gig. When a partner negotiated a 2-week gig where I would just go in and understand the situation. And then that 2-week gig would be turned into a multi-year, 7-8 figure, program, right? Helping the organization. So being able to, parachute in and understand what's going on and, be able to build more.
I went from out of consulting into an enterprise role, and one thing I was worried about was whether I'd have enough variety, because there was so much variety in what we did in consulting. Moving around different clients, different. Most of the consultancy tended to get the hard problems, right? So there was really interesting problems we're trying to solve, and then I actually found it to be very fulfilling. Actually, it was different problems and had more accountability for the outcome than you do when you're a consultant. But then coming back out of that enterprise role into consulting has been a great experience as well, because now I've got all that operational experience, and that just enhances I think it enhances the practicality of what you're recommending to clients, because you've lived through some of those, solving some of those problems.
Yeah, very much so. Right now you're sort of a peer. You've been through it. They understand it. You understand ownership. You understand the influence that you have to wield. That there's definitely a different level of respect that you're able to garner.
Yeah, exactly. So, having been through all those different roles, as you think about giving advice to people coming up, and I think you mentioned a couple of times, you're mentoring people as that going to start their careers in security. What advice would you give to people that are coming up and looking maybe potentially to move into CISO role sometime in the future?
Yeah. Be curious, dig a lot, be a go-getter, be a problem solver, take ownership. Don't just say that, don't pass the buck. Don't be the one that says, that was this person's responsibility, or this is not our team's responsibility. Make things happen, right? I've always, being a consultant in a Big Four, it's a very competitive environment. It's certain caliber of people that are trying to kind of make a name for themselves, right? Or are trying to make an impact. So it's very motivated people. So I would say that's kind of a little bit of difference between working in industry and working in consulting. I think people in consulting are, some are naturally motivated, some are forced to be motivated, right? Not as much in industry. So it was always, they would stand out. The individuals that are motivated and willing to figure things out and make your life easier, make your job easier, are always the ones that's going to be more successful. Again, come to me and help me identify a situation, but help me identify a path through, right? These are the people that I latch onto that grow trust with me and I make leaders from, right? And it makes turning them into leaders a lot easier, right? I've been fortunate that there's at least, half a dozen folks that I mentored that are leaders themselves now, doing wonderful, more successful than me. I love to see that, right? So have that attitude. I think that attitude means a lot more than what an MBA I studied in college.
So I have not heard the name Anderson Consulting in a while, but it did trigger a story for me, and I would be brief. I have a brother, Andy, who went to business school, and midway through the semester, the professor goes, "Hey, Andy, do you mind coming in? Would you speak to the class about your family's business?" And he's like, what are you talking about? So my dad was a tax attorney. He had worked for a small law firm. And then he started thinking, so my brother's real legal name is Arthur Anderson. And so they just assumed that we were related to the shooter, Arthur Anderson. And so we're S-O-N, not S-E-N. And so this has actually happened to like my dad and my brother a couple times where people just assume that we're related to a accounting firm. But I hadn't actually thought about that until you brought this up. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny. All right. So this is the Cyber Smokehouse. So we do have to ask you some smoking, cooking questions. Are you a outdoor chef cook? Do you do any smoking, barbecuing?
Not tried. My family says that they don't like my barbecue, except for the ribs. They like my ribs, but other than that, they're not so happy with the steaks.
All right, at least you get outside and you do some steak cooking. All right, well, if not that, so what's your favorite restaurant?
I'm fortunate to be in Chicago where there's quite a, good number of steak restaurants. Really, there's a handful I could name off. So, you want to know, let me know when you come to Chicago and we'll go.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Evanston, so I've got my couple favorites. Actually, I usually steakhouses, but like there's a Buffalo Joe's in Evanston, a hot dog place in Silky that I always gotta go.
I will say Ernie is a big hot dog fan. I mean, I've even been to a steak restaurant with him where they had a hot dog on the menu, and instead of eating a steak, he actually had a hot dog.
When I see stuff like that at like nice restaurants, I'm like curious. So it's like a Wagyu hot dog.
I think we're going to do a lightning round. Yes, I think we're going to do a lightning round. All right, so this is a new feature to our podcast. We're trying to do a lightning round here. So we're just looking for first instinct answers. So we'll go ahead with a couple of questions here and just, whatever's top of your head comes off the top of your head. All right, you ready to go?
Ooh.
Hot take. What's the security industry getting completely wrong?
Security awareness training.
Compliance. Is it a necessary evil or is it actually useful?
It's actually useful.
And the biggest myth about what a CISO actually does.
You know what? I would say is the Department of No. That should not be a case.
All right. Well, thank you for doing the lightning round. We're still playing with it, but so far it's been a lot of fun. So that was cool. All right. So, Michael, before we wrap, if people want to find you, follow you, or get in touch, are you out there on social media? Or is there any way they can reach out?
Very simple, linkedin.com/in/Michael Myint.
Well, Michael, this has been a genuine pleasure. Thank you for bringing your honesty and experience to the Cyber Smokehouse today.
Many thanks for having me on the show.
And to everyone listening, if you got something out of today's conversation, if it made you think, made you laugh, tell someone about it. That's how we grow the community. Subscribe to wherever you get podcasts, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Cyber Smokehouse.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
And that wraps another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at cybersmokehouse.com. Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm.
TBD Cyber works with organizations to assess their security program, develop and implement security initiatives, and optimize their security investments. We work in areas as broad as data security, risk management, cyber resilience, and security architecture. Our clients value us for our extensive expertise and independent advice, which is why we do not sell security products or deliver managed security services. If you want to work with a trusted advisor, we can help. You can learn more at tbdcyber.com. We'll see you on the next one.